the scene. An important partnership because, along with a number of other victories, he also won the hour record in Mexico City with one of his Merckx bikes. Yes, Merckx came along in 1971, but I had in fact met Eddie sometime before that because I got to know him when he won the San Remo race ahead of Gianni Motta. Merckx's masseur was one of my former racing cyclists. His name was Mick Hills. Anyway, Mick Hills came by on the eve of the San Remo race. I'd given Merckx a pair of special wheels because he was racing for another firm, another bicycle factory. So I had already had the opportunity to meet Merckx before that. When he came to work for the Molteni firm, a star arrived. What can I say? Merckx was Merckx. He was unique. As far as I was concerned, Merckx was born to be a racing cyclist. He would have done well in any profession. He's a conscientious person. Water, wind, ice. He did things seriously. He did them because that was his job. The hour record came after a bit of a flat year. He had won a Giro d'Italia, a Tour de France, not very much. Then he took a fall in Ocaña. Well, we made the bike that set the hour record, but we started making it with the Giro d'Italia in mind. How we would make it and how to make a lightweight bike, and above all, seeing as everyone was talking about titanium and magnesium at the time, where we could have got hold of that kind of material in Italy, and who would have been able to wield titanium. And in fact, to get handlebars welded in titanium, we had to send them to Detroit. We sent 2 or 3 handlebars by air to Detroit to get them welded. I remember that we made a hole in every link in the Regina S chain so that the bike weighed just over 5.5 kilos. The Mexico frame was created around that time, wasn't it? We made a special 410s frame for Merckx, a really light one so that it would hold firm on the bands on the track, whereas the Mexico frame was created with Mexico 1972 in mind, but it had ribs. We started making something a bit different with special ribs which were aligned in a certain way, and this frame was called Mexico. It was one of the first. In 1974, you had a very important sponsorship from Schick. What are your memories of that time? I remember that I was good friends with Gigante. There was Vittorio, who was racing for Schick, and a lot of other racing cyclists. And Mr. Fornari came to speak to me one day and said he wanted to race with our bicycles. There was a kind of club for young racing cyclists at my house, one of whom was called Baron Kelly, who had won a Tour dell'Avvenire, and Mr. Fornari was interested in this cyclist. Then we decided to create a bicycle under the Colnago brand name, and Mr. Fornari gave me the chance to put the name Colnago on the shorts of the cyclist in his team as a gift, and I still owe him thanks for that. It was the first association, and I'll always cherish that memory. But didn't you introduce a young man to Schick who went on to become a great champion at world level too? Saronni, Giuseppe Saronni. I took along this young man Saronni because, you know, I knew Chiapano well, who was firstly a racing cyclist and then became sports director at Schick. He and Gigante were there, and I knew that Saronni wanted to turn professional. But we'd always known him as a sprint cyclist, also because he'd been racing in our local area. But I realized straight away that it would have been really easy because everyone knows him, that he was one step ahead of everyone else, and he was fast. And I remember that he came to me saying, I want to become a professional cyclist even though I'm young. I don't want to be an amateur anymore because you race on the tracks too much. I want to race on the road. What about uphill? I asked him. Uphill. He was about to leave for the Giro della Val d'Aosta. I managed just as well uphill, you know. In fact, he won the toughest leg of the Giro della Val d'Aosta. So I took him to see Mr. Fornari. I went there with Mr. Chiapano, and I remember that Schick needed a sprint cyclist, as Enrico Pollini was about to stop competing and Cerruti had been taken on. Roberto Cerruti, who was Italian amateur champion, and they were giving Cerruti 60,000 lira a month. 60,000 lira a month. But then the team that was managing Cerruti went professional, and the position at Schick became available again, and Serrani was chosen for it. But he wasn't given the same salary as Cerruti because they thought he wasn't up to Cerruti's standard, although I didn't agree. They told him, "Beppe, don't get angry. You'll see that after the first 2 or 3 races, your salary will be doubled straight away." In fact, in the first race, after 6 days, world champions Martez won, and he came second in the Iguelia race. That's Serrani for you. Serrani, an important name for you, bearing in mind the fact that when he transferred to Del Tongo Colnago, he won the world championship at Goodwood. Well, as I said before, Serrani is currently the cyclist who works most closely with us, also because he lives nearby. When I brought him to Del Tongo Colnago, I remember going to Arezzo and saying, "I'm going to bring you a cyclist who can win 20-25 races a year." Oh, 20-25 races. He then went on to win 40, and that was when he showed he was capable of winning, say, 8 stages of the Giro d'Italia. He won the Giro d'Italia, he won the World Championship at Goodwood, a wonderful race. At the start he managed to overtake Kelly and the other American. Anyway, he gave so much. He was the one that invented the train. The train was one of his inventions. When he held a 7 or 8 minute advantage over his opponents with the Del Tongo Colnago yellow train, there racing ahead, no one was able to catch him. You became increasingly famous and your firm gained ever more prestige. Then, in 1986, a historic collaboration with Ferrari began, intended to transfer cutting-edge Formula One technology to racing bicycles, and the C35 bike was conceived. I thought, isn't it possible to create a bicycle that's different from the others? Bike with hydraulic brakes, extendable handlebars, a gear change without tendi catena. Around that time, the engineering sector was being introduced at Ferrari, and as I knew a few people who worked there, we began collaborating with them. We created a bike called Concept with a Desmo Dromo gear change, but our intention was to make a bike that weighed less than 10 kilos. And in spite of the 3-spoke carbon wheels suggested by Enzo Ferrari, the Concept with its heavy gear change ended up weighing around 13 kilos, and I thought we wouldn't have been able to sell it. That was the first carbon bike. After a few attempts, the C35 was conceived. One day I was in the factory near Enzo Ferrari and the engineers, and they asked me, "Why do you design bicycles with a curved fork?" I replied, "To absorb the road vibrations." They told me that that was a contradiction in terms. I was astounded, seeing as I'd been making bicycles for great racing cyclists for 35 years. So they showed me a computer simulation using an uneven, bumpy terrain, and I realized that a straight fork absorbed the shock on bumpy terrain much better. That was an incredible lesson for me. I then started making a bike with a straight fork known as Precisa. A number of cyclists liked this innovative idea, saying that the bike was easier to handle and absorbed the shock better. Later on, we introduced other innovative changes such as the Carbitubo frame. We have always been bold enough to introduce innovations, and as a result, we have won races all around the world with both carbon and titanium. What about the 90s, when the collaboration with the Mapei team began, an incredible team that won everything with the master frame? Museu, Parigi-Roubaix and cycle races in northern Italy. I first met Squinzi at the Cologne Cycle Fair. On that occasion we talked about the possibility of creating a large team. During that fair, Tony Rominga One of my favorite cyclists came to see me.